It's time this morning to welcome our guest speaker to Oklahoma City. He is truly an American hero. Served in the Army for 23 years, 17 deployments in 5 wars. He doesn't look that old. This guy's Rambo, let me tell you. He served in the invasion of Panama, Operation Desert Storm, Black Hawk Down in Somalia, and more than a dozen combat tours, a dozen in Afghanistan and Iraq. Among his numerous commendations for service, he was awarded the Silver Star for bravery in combat. His name is Jeff Struecker. In 1996, he won the David L. Grange Best Ranger Competition. 2 years later, he was recognized as the US Army ROTC Noncommissioned Officer of the Year. He is in the US Army Ranger Hall of Fame and spent his final 10 years in the Army serving as a chaplain in Airborne and Ranger units. Jeff holds a PhD from Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary in Wake Forest. He also has several other earned and honorary degrees. He is the lead pastor of Two Cities Church in Columbus, Georgia. Is this not amazing? And is an award-winning author with 5 books in print. He and his wife, Dawn, have 5 children and 4 grandchildren. Please join us in welcoming to the podium Major Jeff Struecker.
Thank you so much for being here today. Gentlemen and ladies, I want you to know, as a warrior and a patriot, just how special this is. I think if you look anywhere in America, you would not find a gathering of business and community leaders like in Oklahoma City, not anywhere. And so I am proud of you for being here this morning. And I just want to thank the CBMC team for asking you to get up early in the morning like the U.S. military and feel what it's like to get up at some unholy hour in the morning. I have faced some of America's greatest greatest threats. I've stood between our country and our enemies for decades. But the last thing I want to do today is stand between you and the coffee, so feel free to get up if you need another cup. I realize it's been really early this morning. I'm going to take a couple of minutes. I'll be very brief, but I want to talk about the importance of bringing your faith to work. And I really do believe that when leaders, I'm talking civic leaders or business leaders, I'm talking when leaders in the home get serious and are vocal and public about their faith, I think it makes a huge difference to people around you. And you may never know the difference that it's making. And I think I'm a personal example of that. So I'm going to walk around a little bit just to keep the guys and the cameras on their toes. I joined the Army while I was still in high school, but I had this very, very solid Christian faith. For me, this began at 13 years old when, for no merit of my own, God decided to reach down and to grab this 13-year-old kid that was getting in a lot of trouble and just radically changed my life. And at 18, I was sitting in high school and not really sure what I wanted to do with my future. And so I showed up to an Army recruiter's office, and they pointed me towards the United States Army's Ranger Regiment. This is a special operations unit. I had the privilege of serving with some of the greatest warriors this country has ever produced. And I also shared my faith with those guys at work. I was pretty vocal. I was pretty open about my faith. But the truth is, Army Rangers are really smart, really strong, incredibly competent. And a lot of those guys and gals that I served with didn't share my faith. In fact, they kind of thought it was a crutch. They said, Jeff, you can have that Jesus stuff if you want. If that's what you need to get you through some tough times, you can have that stuff, but I don't need them because I've got where I'm at all on my own. And it's true. They did get to this point in life all on their own. And I tried to be pretty vocal about my faith. I tried to be honest and to just show what I believed at work. I was leading Bible studies and buying pizza just to try to convince soldiers to skip the army chow and come eat some pizza, and let's open the Bible and let's talk about Jesus for a little bit. And I did this for several years in the Army, but I never realized how profound it could be to be very public about your faith, especially when life gets rough. And now I'm talking to that stay-at-home mom who's facing a family crisis right now. Or I'm talking to that business leader in this room who's facing real labor or supply chain problems right now. And people are watching. You may not even know that they're watching. I didn't realize how significant this was until, as you heard from my story, I was a sergeant in the Ranger Regiment in Somalia back in 1993. For me, this feels like lifetimes ago. But at the time that I showed up in Somalia as part of this Special Operations Task Force, I had already been to combat a couple of times. I had already taken part in the invasion of Panama in '89, in Kuwait in Desert Storm in '91. So for me, in Oklahoma language, this is not my first rodeo. But Somalia was different, because in Somalia, we faced this determined enemy that was willing to kill and willing to die, even willing to send their women and children to die, if necessary, just to defeat America. You probably remember, if you've seen the movie Black Hawk Down, you probably remember the screen at the beginning of the movie that gives you a little bit of detail about what's happening in the country, but it doesn't tell you about just how severe this famine is that led to the United Nations and the US showing up in Somalia. And what that movie doesn't tell you is the incredibly good country that you live in. See, in '93, there had been for a couple of years a drought, there had been a famine, there had been 400,000 people that had died of starvation by the time that the United States Marines landed on the beaches of Somalia in December of '92 to just try to hand out food. The sole reason the U.S. was there, we're not there to conquer their land, we're not there to take their natural resources, we're there to give them beans and rice and just give them one more chance at another day before another family member starved to death. And this capital city of Mogadishu was very different than Oklahoma City. There's no military, there's no police force, which means there's nothing stopping lawless men, guys with guns, from doing whatever they can to try to take over the land. And there was a warlord who made a decision to start to target the United Nations workers there, started to target U.S. supply convoys, and his goal was to use food as a weapon against his own people. He's going to take all of the United Nations food supplies and he's going to starve his people into submission. And in the summer of '93, this warlord by the name of Mohammed Farah Aidid ambushed the United Nations food distribution site and killed all of the UN workers. That's what prompted the United States to assemble this very small, highly surgical special operations force called Task Force Ranger. It was my unit, a company of Rangers from Georgia. It was a helicopter unit from Kentucky, and then special operations warriors from all branches of the military up and down the East Coast. And we went to Somalia with a kill or capture mission. Our goal is to get Aidid and take down the top-ranking leadership in his clan. And this, for me, becomes one of the biggest life-changing moments in my Army career. And it's actually not the 18-hour firefight that I went through. It's the moments immediately after that firefight is over with that God used to change my life in a direction I didn't even imagine. So I'm in Somalia. I am a sergeant and a squad leader leading the Humvees in and out of the city streets every time this task force goes to do a mission. And if you've seen the movie Black Hawk Down, we get a tip on Sunday afternoon that there's a couple of high-ranking bad guys meeting in the same building at the same time. I think I should describe for you that at this point, the task force, my unit has been there for about 3 months. We have been trying for the whole time to take down the top leadership. We've taken most of the bad guys out of the equation, but we still haven't got the number one guy ID'd and a couple of his high-ranking leaders. And now 2 of those high-ranking leaders are in the same building at the same time. This hasn't happened the whole time we've been there. And we're getting a lot of pressure from the president's administration to wrap this thing up and to get out of Somalia, because the news is starting to call Somalia another Vietnam. And when we get this tip that there's 2 really high-profile bad guys in the same building, our big boss, Major General William Garrison, has a decision, a terrible decision he has to make. Special operators do business at night. Our technology, our equipment gives us a massive advantage on the battlefield. We almost never do daylight operations. And this is the middle of the afternoon. It's the very heart of the part of town controlled by ID'd, and this is the most dangerous of all circumstances. You can't make this any worse when our big boss, General Garrison, makes the call to send us in and to go get these 2 bad guys. So special operators assault the target building on Little Bird helicopters, and other Rangers from my unit fly in on Black Hawks. They slide down ropes, and they provide some blocking positions at the 4 corners of the target building. And while all of that is going on, I lead a long column of Humvees through the city streets. Now, my job is to get to the target building about the moment that the helicopters are flying away. We're going to wait about a half a block away, and we're going to wait for the call that the building is secure, the bad guys are in our custody, and then we'll drive up the last half block. We'll get everybody who flies in by helicopter, and the plan is, let's get out of there in less than 30 minutes, because this thing could be really, really ugly. And as soon as I arrived at the target building, I was greeted with enemy gunfire, and this battle was on from the moment that we showed up. When those helicopters were flying in and when those Rangers were sliding down the rope, one of those guys from my unit missed the rope and he fell about 70 feet and he landed in the city streets head first. So as soon as I arrived to my position, my battalion commander, Colonel Danny McKnight, was calling me on the radio saying, "Jeff, we've got a very seriously wounded Ranger. I need you to drive your Humvees up to him. I need you to get him and take him back to our surgeon. He needs immediate medical attention." When I got to Todd Blackburn, this Ranger who fell from the helicopter, he was already unconscious. And he had a couple of special operations medics working on him, trying to keep him alive. We placed him on a Humvee with no protection around him. It was kind of like a pickup truck. And then I split my men in half and put half of my guys on a Humvee behind him. And I took the Humvee in front of him. And we provided some guns and some protection to get him out of the target building. Now, I'm under enemy fire the whole time that I'm there. But we start to drive Todd Blackburn back to the base. I haven't even been on the target for 5 minutes when I'm already getting sent back to our base. And I drive down a narrow alleyway right next to the target building. And then I turn onto one of the major roads in this world capital. And when I say major roads, it's dirt and about 2 lanes wide. And when I turned that corner, the entire city erupted with gunfire on these 3 Humvees. Now, I'm not going to ruin your breakfast by telling you exactly how this felt in graphic detail, but I will say that we started to get hit from hundreds of directions all at the same time. There were guys on rooftops with rocket-propelled grenades. They were also just lobbing hand grenades at us. We were getting hit with automatic gunfire, and the buildings right next to us were 20 feet away, and we're getting hit from every possible direction. There's a guy on a 50 caliber machine gun on top of my Humvee who's spraying bullets, trying to return fire, just trying to keep us safe. And he really wasn't being very effective that way. So I directed him to take his machine gun and pick up the bad guys on the left side of the vehicle. There was also another guy sitting behind me. His name is Dominic Pilla. And to this day, Pilla is the greatest machine gunner I've ever seen in my life. I told Pilla to take his machine gun and pick up all of the bad guys on the right side of the Humvee. I'm in the front of the vehicle, so I'll take care of everybody that's in front of us. Another guy in the back seat will take care of everybody behind us. And at this point, for the warriors in this room, you know what I'm describing, because we're just now trying to keep each other alive long enough to make it back to the base. And down on the right side of the Humvee, hiding next to a building, waiting for us, was a Somali gunman. And he noticed Dominic Pilla at the same time that Pilla saw him. And these two guys shot and killed each other instantly. Now, the movie deliberately downplays the violence, but Pilla was shot in the forehead, and he took a massive head wound and died instantly. And when he was shot, everyone around me began to panic because we all realized we may not survive to see the light of day. And as a leader in charge of this mission, I reminded myself, Jeff, you have to get yourself under control if you're going to be able to get your men under control. So very calmly, I started to direct my men, and I started to fight my way back to the base. I don't have time this morning to tell you what it took for us to make it back to the base, but I will tell you, as soon as I get back, I get greeted with a scene that is chaos. And I mean, the surgeon is running to get to Todd Blackburn to try to keep him alive. And the medics are coming to my vehicle to pull Dominic Pilla's body off of the back. And people are scurrying everywhere. And my boss, Lieutenant Larry Moores, walks up to me and he says, "Hey, Jeff, we just had a second Black Hawk helicopter get shot down." Now, I was fighting for my life. I didn't even know that the first one went down. He said, "We've already put the search and rescue force in when Cliff Wolcott's helicopter was shot down. Now Mike Durant has been shot down, and we don't have anybody else. So Jeff, I need you to get back on your Humvees. I need you to go back out on the city streets, and I need you to see if there's anybody alive at the Durant crash site." One of the guys who came back with me, a special operator, overheard this whole conversation. You see this scene in the movie because he says, "Hey, Sergeant, if you're really going to go back into those city streets tonight, don't leave your men in the back of that Humvee sitting in all of that blood." He said, "Man, that will really mess them up for a long time." So I sent the rest of my guys, go get some more fuel, get some more ammunition, get ready to go back out into the city streets. And I pulled this one Humvee off to the side, and I started to clean it up with my bare hands. And folks, I am not at all embarrassed to tell you the moments at the back of that Humvee in Mogadishu, Somalia, are to this day the most terrifying moments of my life. There hasn't even been something that comes close to second. You see, I'm in the back of this Humvee, and I'm thinking, I know I'm going to die if I go back out in those city streets. I'm thinking about my men. And at this point, the only guy that we know that's killed in action was sitting just inches away from me. And I'm thinking, every one of my men are going to die if I order them back out into the city streets. And I have been married at this point to my high school sweetheart. We've been trying for a couple of years to have a baby. And I got a letter in the mail just a couple of weeks after arriving in Somalia saying that she was pregnant with our first child. And I was thinking, I'm never going to see my wife again. And my child will never even know who their father is. And everything inside of me was saying, don't go back out into those city streets. But I am a ranger, and I have committed my life to my buddies. In fact, I get up in the morning as an Army Ranger, and I literally swear my life to my buddies in what's called the Ranger Creed. And I pledge to them that I will never leave a fallen comrade to fall into the hands of the enemy. And I'm at the back of this Humvee, and I'm terrified because I know I have no choice. I've got to go back out there. And at this moment, my faith took over. What you heard Gabby sing just a moment ago was a moment that I experienced for real. Where I'm at the back of this Humvee and I'm praying, God, if I go back out in those city streets, I know I'm going to die. God, I'm scared. God, I need your help. And it's the vivid reminder that the Bible describes when David says, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. And here's why. Because God, you are with me. At the back of that Humvee, I just simply say, God, I'm in trouble. I need your help. I'm going back out into those city streets, and I need you with me. And in the back of that vehicle, God reminded me, Jeff, you placed your soul in my hands at 13 years old, and I will take care of you. He reminded me, Jeff, if this battle goes well, if you survive this thing, you go back home to Fort Benning, Georgia, you get a chance to go back to your family, your baby that's on the way. But tonight, if tonight is the night that you die on these streets, before your body hits the ground, Jeff, I need you to know that you will be with me in heaven forever. And would you look up here for just a second? Because I'm standing at the back of that Humvee, and it starts to dawn on me. Go home to my family in Georgia, or go home to my Father in heaven? No matter what happens next, I cannot lose because of my rock-solid Christian faith. That moment for me was like a light switch that got flipped, because from that instant on, for the rest of the night until 9 o'clock the next morning, I was 100% certain that I was going to die, but I was absolutely without fear. I don't need to worry about what happens next because I know exactly where I'm going to spend eternity. And the reason I'm here before you this morning, challenging you to behave your faith, to make it public, be vocal about it. You don't have to be obnoxious, you don't have to be offensive, but just be very natural and very real about your faith, is because of what I experienced as soon as I arrived back in to the base the next morning. It's 9 o'clock the next morning. I am the last vehicle to arrive back at our base, and my Ranger buddies are waiting for me. And I mean, lined up waiting for me. And they said, Jeff, I listened to your voice over the radio last night, and there's something different about you. They said, I watched you in the city streets, and you have something that I don't have. I don't even know what it is, Jeff, but whatever it is, I want that. How can I have what you have? And I spent the next day, immediately after getting off of those Humvees, telling my Ranger brothers that it is my rock-solid faith in Jesus Christ that made it possible for me to do what I did on the battlefield last night. I've had a chance to share Jesus with almost all of them. I am thrilled to be able to tell you most of those men, if not all of them, have since come to the same solid faith that I have. Has nothing to do with me. They've all just realized I shouldn't be around today. God must have a reason for sparing my life. And now I really want to challenge you. Because some of you came today just because you were invited. Let's be honest. A few of you came today so that you could network or shake hands with some pretty important people in this room. But before you leave, I want you to experience a risen Savior. What Easter Sunday said last weekend is absolutely true, and I am living proof. If that grave is empty, and if there is no reason to fear death, then whatever life throws at you next, you have nothing to fear. When you placed your soul in the hands of the Creator of the universe, the one who loves you and gave his life for you. And because I pastor a church in Georgia now, I realize that when I start to challenge people about the word faith or about the word believe, we have two different definitions of that word. So I just want to clear something up very quickly for you. I'm going to challenge you in just a second to put genuine faith, to really believe, and I mean to stake it all, believe in Jesus Christ as the atoning sacrifice for your sins. But the problem with the word believe, when I use it in South Georgia, a lot of people think, well, I believe in Jesus. For me, I believe in Jesus just like I believe in George Washington. He's a guy that I read about in a book, and I believe that he's real. And I'm like, no, I don't think you understand what I mean by believe. I'm not asking you to intellectually accept that he's real. I'm asking you to radically surrender your soul. You see, Jesus says it this way: anybody who is not willing to leave his mother and father, forsake his family, basically give up everything to follow me, is not worthy of me. And what Jesus is challenging you to do is to lay everything else aside and to say, if you're not real, and if there is no afterlife, then I am desperately helpless, and there's no one that can clean this 13-year-old kid up and make me acceptable to the Father in heaven. So what I'm going to challenge you to do in just a second, what I'm going to pray for you to do in just a moment, is right there where you're sitting. If you're that guy or that gal who's gone to church, you've heard about Jesus, but he's no more real to you than George Washington or Abraham Lincoln, I'm going to pray that today, this morning, you radically surrender to him. And I'm going to pray that by surrendering to him, your life is transformed like mine was. And he is so real to you that when you walk out the doors of this room, you walk out different, and people say, man, there's something about you. I don't even know what it is, but I want it. And how can I have what you've got? So if you don't mind, because this is a prayer breakfast, why don't you just bow your heads, and why don't you let me pray for you right now as I wrap up this morning. Father, you have brought people from all over this community to this room this morning, and you didn't bring them here to hear a war story. You brought them here because this is the morning that you wanted to deal with some men and women in this room about eternity. And maybe there are a few that came this morning and they've read the stories in the Bible about Jesus, and they kind of understand that Jesus is real, but they've never been radically touched by him. They've never been transformed by him. I'm praying that right now somebody sitting in their seat would just silently, from a quiet heart, cry out a prayer of desperation. A prayer that says, God, if you're not real, if Jesus didn't really leave heaven and come to earth and die on that cross in my place, then I have no hope of having my mistakes and my sins paid for. God, either Jesus is real and he really loved me enough that he was willing to go on this suicide mission to pay for my sins, or I'm helpless in my mistakes and failures. But God, I don't even really understand all that this means, but I believe. I really believe that not only did he die on that cross 2,000 years ago, but they laid his body in a grave, and 3 days later, he took up his life again and came out of that grave alive. And here I am, God. I've got nothing to offer you but mistakes and failures, but I'm turning it all over to you, and I'm trusting you, and I'm asking you, God, would you forgive me? God, would you heal me? God, would you change me because of the sacrificial death and this miraculous resurrection of Jesus Christ? I am placing my soul in your hands this morning, which means anywhere you want me to go, whatever it is that you want me to do, anything you want me to give up, God, I'm giving it up, asking you, would you change me? And Father, I believe that you can hear the silent prayers from heaven, and that you hear that prayer and you honor it. But I also believe that there may be a guy or a gal in this room who has a rock-solid faith, but they've just not been comfortable showing it. Would you help them today to bring their faith to work, not just today, but every day? Because I'm convinced if they will do that, people will see it. they'll stand up and take notice, and they may even ask them one day in a moment of need, hey, you have something. You have something that I need, and I don't know what it is. So how can I have what you've got? God, would you move right now in a very powerful way, and would you do this for your glory, for the good of the people that are in this room? It's in the name of Jesus Christ, my King, that I pray this. Amen. Thank you so much, y'all, for the privilege of being with you today. God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.